Well, joining me live now is Professor of Political Science at Cypress College, Peter Mathews. Professor, thank you so much for joining us. We just heard there Biden talking about what his situation is in Ukraine, but also more recently, we've just got some news this morning about 4 Israeli hostages that have been rescued from Gaza, the biggest operation of its kind since the conflict began and between Israel and Hamas. Professor, we're hearing that US President Joe Biden welcomed the rescue, but we believe he hasn't addressed the reported Palestinians killed and injured. What more do you know?
It's true that he did, in fact, talk about the rescue, and it was remarkable. 4 of them, Israeli hostages, were rescued by the military. But on the other hand, there were over 100, according to reports we've gotten recently, over 150 Palestinians in Gaza that were killed, and mostly were all civilians during that operation. And that is hugely tragic, Jamie. It has reverberations because that spreads out to the civilian population. And as you know, over 36,000 Gazans have already been killed in the actions that Israel took after the October 7th kidnapping of its people, as well as the killing of its people, about 1,200 people. And Israel launched this invasion of Gaza and the bombing of Gaza, and over 36,000 people. For every person killed like that, especially young men, there are going to be other people who will be resentful, and it's a fertile ground for more terrorists to arise. So there has to be a way, Janie, to negotiate this, to pull back Israel's sometimes a little heavy-handed approach to what they want to do to defeat Hamas. But they cannot defeat Hamas just through military means. They have to use political means, negotiations, diplomacy, and the U.S. should be adamant about that as well. And Biden should be looking at it in an objective way, and not just praise Israel for rescuing the hostages, which are very important, but also look at the tragedy of over 100 people, or civilians mostly, killed in the operation that were Gazans.
All right, let's turn our attention to the election. It's about 5 months away, I believe. But what are the polls looking like at the moment?
They're looking very, very close. And the polls, depending on who's doing the polling, can be within 1 or 2 percentage points, one way or the other, for Biden or for Trump. But the key is those swing voters in the states that are called the swing states. So about 7 states in which the vote is very closer than other states. And whichever way those states will go will determine who will become president. And we know that, looking at the primary election that just happened on Tuesday, that both Biden and Trump have lost some of their base of support in those primary outcomes, because in the primaries, between 12 and 20% of the voters on each side did not vote for Biden or Trump. And those are a bunch of people who are up for grabs. And both of them are going to try to go after those voters in the general election. And whoever is successful in turning those voters into their side and turning out their own supporters with enthusiasm will win. So it's going to be very close. People are concerned about how it's going to turn out. We don't know the implications, for example, of this upcoming verdict. That's going to be actually not the verdict. The verdict was already found, in which Trump was found guilty, but the actual sentencing of President Trump will be coming up on July the 11th. That could have tremendous implications as well.
And what about Hunter Biden? The prosecution has wrapped up his criminal trial, and the US president's son is accused of lying about drug use during a firearm purchase in 2018. Some people are saying it's a bit of a tit for tat with what's going on with both sides. Would you agree?
Well, I'm sure there were some people on the Trump side that are happy there's another trial going on for the other side. But on the other hand, it is important that this trial go through to see whether Hunter was guilty or not of lying on the federal document, saying that he was not using drugs, when it's possible some witnesses have seen to show an indication that he may have been using drugs at the same time that he actually signed that document to purchase the gun. And certainly it's not President Biden that's involved in this. That has to be made clear. In the case of President Trump, it was he himself who was found guilty of 34 felony counts, whereas in this case, it's Hunter Biden who's up for trial on possible felony count. And he's the son of the president. He's not the president himself. And he's a man, a grown man. So no one can really tie that to President Biden. But I think the Trump side would like to try to do that and see if that will damage Biden's chances of winning a few voters in the middle, in the swing states, that could cost him the election.
If Trump were to get in, what would this look like, do you think?
Well, there have been many experts are predicting dire circumstances, because President Trump has sworn revenge on his political enemies, perceived enemies, and opponents, sworn revenge, and he's even talked about putting them in jail and finding ways to adjust the Justice Department to change its proclivity of how it's supposed to be independent from the president. He wants to bring the DOJ, the Department of Justice, under the president's purview, his own purview. And that way you could appoint the attorney general and then also appoint other people below that and have them completely loyal to him and use the Justice Department as a vehicle to, punish, as he says, those whom he thinks have wrongfully hurt him during his trials. But his trials have gone, the whole rule of law was followed carefully in the process when President Trump went through trial. And I think that his side should accept the results and then work with that. But instead, to say you're going to take revenge against an unspecified number of opponents, or as he calls them, enemies, it's very dangerous. It's the shades of some of the so-called third world countries that have actually had those kinds of actions that are very dangerous for democracy. And people are concerned what would happen when if President Trump gets elected, how he will behave. Will he go along with democratic norms and the rule of law and respect opponents and still be president? It's dependent on how this sentencing goes on July the 11th and where he will be when he's campaigning and also when he's elected. There's so many unknowns, Janie, and we all can hope and pray for the best, really, and then keep our eye on it.
Yeah, we'll certainly know by November. But with these trials, we do hear that sometimes it elevates the popularity of the person running.
It actually has with certain President Trump supporters. For example, the low information and what we call low propensity voters who have become his supporters recently, they are very gung-ho now. They're saying this is our hero, he's our martyr, and they're out there saying they're going to vote for him. But that's the group of people that don't vote regularly, and they only voted once or twice, or not at all. They're just new voters. On the other hand, the voters that he needs to keep, that Trump needs to keep if he wants to win, are the moderate Republicans or the conservative Republicans who are rule of law, who believe in the rule of law no matter what their ideologies on politics and economics. They believe that democracy must prevail. From conservative to liberal to moderate Republicans who believe in the rule of law, those are the educated, college-educated Republicans whom he has to keep from the suburbs especially, and he's losing them. He's lost them already because many of them voted for Nikki Haley. Even when she wasn't even campaigning, they voted for her. About 20% in those primaries voted for her. He's got to bring them back if he's going to win. And the low propensity voters that are gung-ho about him because of this martyrdom, they might not even show up at the polls. They may not even show up at the polls on Election Day.
Professor Peter Mathews, live from Los Angeles. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you so much as always.
Thank you. My pleasure.